Greetings, family. Welcome to the second episode of Your Work Aunty podcast. I'm your host, Kalaida Holmes, and I want to thank you all so much for the love you've shown. And for those of you who've just shared, even if you haven't had a chance to listen yet, those of you who are listening now, and just so much, I so appreciate it. I have so much great content as well as other guests that I would like to bring on over the next few months. And I'm just very, very excited to share that with you all and really go along with this journey to create and enhance our abundant lives even better. I'm a little bit under the weather, which is why this week's episode is late. So I appreciate you all being patient, and also shout out to everyone who signed up for my mailing list. So for those of you, let's talk a little logistics before we get into this week's episode. You can follow my podcast now. I'm on Audible, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. So almost anywhere you can listen to podcasts, you can follow Your Work Aunty. But you can also join my newsletter. So when there's upcoming events and things that may not actually be a podcast, that's where you'll learn about it. But it will probably also be covered within podcast content. But if you want to stay up to date on Your Work Aunty news and resources, definitely subscribe to my podcast by going to yourworkaunty.com and subscribing there. If you are on my YouTube channel, I'm going to use my YouTube channel a lot more to engage with you all and perhaps do some live streams in the future. Also on Instagram, I am not a TikTok girly, at least not yet. So for now, for future live streams and questions and answers and maybe even some one-on-one interview and resume coaching opportunities, follow me on Instagram and YouTube for those as well. But I want to thank you all so much. I really felt the love last week, and I actually did some really great numbers on all of the services and saw some subscriptions. So really, really thankful for you all. And, keep the comments and feedback and suggestions coming. Like I said, this is a podcast for you all. I created it to share with more people at once all the things I've learned and to bring my friends and network and other really dope people to you all to help, again, like I said, to help us all achieve a level of success and have access to information you may not normally have access to. And maybe you do already have access, but you haven't heard it from me, or like I could put it. So, all right, let's get into this week's episode. So like I said, we have many other topics coming. But I wanted to stay on the theme of preparation because my original idea for this podcast was initially career only because I wanted to help people who were out in the job market looking for their next opportunity, or people who just haven't been able to break through, figure out ways to, move forward and ace that interview, crush that resume, have your references seal the deal for you. That's really what I wanted to do. So this episode is about that interview prep. It's not about the interview. We have episodes coming up soon where we'll be talking about that actual in the interview and how to convey your best self. But this is just about the interview prep. So at the beginning of preparation is honestly gathering all the information you need to determine whether or not you actually want this role or opportunity. I don't know about you all, but I don't do the let me waste my time in an interview just for practice nonsense, or let me waste my time, because it's a stressful event to participate in if you don't really want the job. So these next set of questions or suggestions are to help you decide, is this a job that you actually want? Because for me as a hiring manager, please don't waste my time interviewing with me if you don't want the job for whatever reason. If it's the salary, if it's the location, if it's whatever. Because some people think, well, once I get my resume in front of you or interview you, I can create some new magic. Whether it's private or public sector, most hiring managers don't have the authority to go outside of what was posted. So let's be for real, as the kids say, right? So the first thing you want to ask is the salary. If the salary wasn't published, you want to ask what the salary was. Even if the salary was published, you want to ask if it's a realistic range. So some agencies, or not even agencies, some jobs will post a range, say from $50,000 to $100,000. That's a pretty big range. Sometimes they don't mean that. Sometimes that $100,000 is the maximum you could earn in that particular career based on how the organization built that band or that structure at the time. Some organizations only plan to hire people at maybe $55,000 max or $60,000 max. So you should ask, what is the realistic expected salary for someone in this position? Again, all the things I'm suggesting that you ask is dependent upon you having an honest person communicating to you. But here's what I will tell you. If you are told things in the hiring process and you choose to accept a job and it turns out that that information was false, you can file lawsuits, or get your money back, or do whatever you need to do, but it has to be in writing. So definitely make sure, if you are asking about something, any kind of bonus, perk, whatever, and the hiring manager says sure, and for some reason you get on board, it's like, ta-da, sorry. Definitely make sure you have it in writing so that you can, get whatever recourse you deserve. So ask about the salary. I would like to also say that if you're talking about a government job, the salary range is often very misleading. Generally, if you're coming from outside the government, and even sometimes within, if it's a promotion, you're only going to get that step one. So you're getting the bottom salary of the band. You also have to consider if the job is posted for multiple locations, because sometimes that's confusing as well, because some locations pay higher than the other, and depending on how the agency chose to post, the salary that you may be seeing may be for one locality and not where you actually live. So you want to ask all those kind of questions, like, is this based on my local, like I live in, California, and in this particular county, is this what I will make, or is this for people over in Montana? So definitely you want to ask the questions up front. And if you're a hiring manager right now that you're like, I don't like when people ask me money questions, and I think at some point I probably was that way too, I want to say, get a grip. People are working to pay bills and enjoy life and travel and take care of their kids and pay off college debt. They're not working just because. No one wakes up dreaming of working for minimal wages and to not be able to actually enjoy the fact that they spend more time at work than they do with anybody else in their life. So yeah, get a grip. So you want to ask your salary. You also, related to that, want to ask what's negotiable. Can salaries be negotiated? Can your bonuses be negotiated? Are there bonus programs? Because some places don't give bonuses, like, at all, ever. And if they do give them, they're very piddly. Like, I'm talking 1% or 0.5% or less. So you want to ask, and are those negotiable? Can you get a sign-in bonus? Can you get student loan repayments? Can you have your actual current schools paid for? And is there a service agreement associated with that? I had a candidate once that kept asking if we offer some sort of repayment, and then we actually didn't. But then I said, but you do know, if we did, we would put you into a service agreement. So you'd have to work for us for at least 2 years for that amount of money. And they went, oh, yeah, I don't know if I want to give you all 2 years for that. And I was like, yeah. And then we kind of awkward stare, right? But you definitely want to ask, like, what's negotiable, and then what the fine print is with those particular items. Most sign-in bonuses come with some sort of service agreement. Some of them are like 6 months. Some happen to be a year. Some are downright crazy. Some organizations will also, I've read some articles lately where they offer you training, like, oh, we'll train you how to be the best anesthetist or the best dental hygienist or the best whatever in the world. We'll provide your training. Some of them will require you to pay them back for all the training they've offered you to do the job for them if you leave before a certain time period. So you want to find that out, because if that job or that culture does not work for you and you have to leave and now you have to pay back the skill that you learned that may not even be transferable because you learned it to do the job for them, yeah, you want to get some clarification on that. So benefits to me are very key. I always tell people one of the first things I do, especially outside the government, I'm pretty solid. But when I've worked in private sector, the first thing I did was read the benefits package like it was literally part of my actual job duties, because I wanted to understand every single thing I got. I also requested it before I accepted the job. I'm actually now telling you to request it before you take the interview. If you are someone who currently has an awesome sauce benefits package and you have things like, fertility treatments and surrogate programs and just really good health care, you are actually taking a salary cut in some cases if those are things you really need or use, if you go to an organization that does not. So ask to see what it is, what the catches are, whether or not they're in a marketplace for insurance plans so you can go from a variety of people, or if it's just one crappy insurance plan. So this will probably come up in multiple podcasts, but I went into medical debt because I took a job at one of my previous employers. I didn't ask enough questions or really understand what I was getting into. So I went from like a PPO. I can't remember what the plan difference was, but I know it was a high deductible plan. and from an FSA to an HSA. And let's just say, not only did most of my current providers, ride or die doctors, not take this insurance, nobody took it. And the co-pays were crazy expensive. They weren't like a set amount, like $10, $25, $50, $100, and then once you hit your deductible, it's zero or some low percentage. No, it was always a percentage, and a percentage of really high rates because no one took this insurance, or if they did take it. And then what was crazy to me is if you were referred to someone, like let's say a specialist, and the specialist didn't take the insurance, they would like force me to kind of work it out with the specialist and some other like insurance claims office. Like they didn't just do that for you, like to figure out if they would pay it. It was very crazy. So eventually one of the reasons I actually left that role wasn't like purely, oh, I want to do something different or I'm happy with this job. It was, wow, this job is just, it's fine, but this insurance is like life threatening, like to the point where I wasn't seeing doctors regularly anymore because I was so afraid of the medical debt that was accumulating. And I continued to pay on that medical debt for 6 to 8 months after I left that job. And the impact of me not going to a doctor for about a year while I had some other medical issues impacted me for way after I left that job. So definitely ask to see the benefits package. Many organizations, the benefits stuff is already public. So if you just go to their website, you may be able to find it. If it's not, sometimes it's not public if they have a third party like Insperity or some other payroll provider. And so you may need to ask them like, who's your provider? And, you know, maybe you can find information on their website, or if there's a number you can call. But definitely ask like, hey, can I see that? Now, you may not have time to review all of that before you accept the interview or give them a time. But let's say between now and the time the interview is scheduled, you realize that, yeah, I don't actually want this job anymore. You can reach out to the hiring manager and say, hey, I'm sorry, something came up. I won't be available to interview now, but thank you so much for your time, you know? So you don't have to burn the bridge, but don't waste your time interviewing, especially when interviewing prep is so, it's a very time intensive activity. It's not just, 30 minutes before the interview, review your resume and just show up. I mean, if that's how you roll, good for you. But, for interviews that I've definitely aced and done an amazing job, I absolutely prepped. So you also want to ask about interview details. How many interviews? How many rounds? Will there be a panel? If there's going to be case studies, if they're going to ask for writing samples, will there be any assessments? You want to ask all of those questions. Will you do will it be in higher view round? So I know that many places have gone to higher view, and I don't have anything against higher view. I just feel like having your first round interview be some video where you're just answering prompts and you don't have anyone to react with or talk to just feels a little bit cold for me. So I personally am not a fan of it. And the one time I did one, I remember I kind of just got really annoyed halfway through because a lot of the interview honestly is that engagement or interaction with the person's interviewing you, or making sure that they understand what you are saying or mean. So that definitely didn't sit well with me. But many organizations do use that. So you want to ask, because they're going to be a higher view or AI round of the interview. Number of rounds is key, because number of rounds is going to tell you quite a bit about the organization. If they are asking you to do 5 or 6 rounds of an interview, that's not I don't understand. And if you are a hiring manager or someone in the comments and you're like 5 or 6 rounds is absolutely needed, please tell me why. Write me a dissertation. Let me know. Check me. Get me straight. But from my perspective, if you need 5 or 6 rounds for an interview, there is something wrong with your process. There is either a problem with the job description or a problem with the manager, which is still related to the job description, meaning you all do not know what you want. And so you're conducting all these rounds. There's an issue of perhaps retention or something where you're bringing in candidates that are not staying in the role or turning out to not be a fit, which again, that means there's a problem with the job description, or there's not a clear understanding of the competencies needed to perform the job. And so they're conducting all these rounds to get things clear, or you guys are trying to scam people out of free work because some of the rounds are actually little projects. So I hope it's not the latter. But if you are taking more than 2 to 3 rounds to figure out who a candidate is, I would challenge you to reconsider your process. And if you are a candidate and someone tells you, oh, it's going to be 5 or 6 rounds, I would say save your time. Do you want that job that badly? Do you? Because do you want to give 6 hours plus the preparation time up to do all of that for a job you may not get when there's another job that's only going to take 3 rounds to interview you and you really want it? Let's absolutely consider that. So, and I know we're like, oh, it's out here, it's hard in the market, and people do what they have to do. But I'm just saying, and maybe this is privilege talking because I have a job that I'm happy in. Yeah, I'm not doing that. You also want to ask, who will be on the interview? Is it going to be a panel? Will there be a note taker? Generally, they don't have that, but I was on a panel recently and there was a note taker, but you should ask, especially if you get nervous, if it's more than 1 or 2 people. I think at this point, most of us are used to Zoom and other things. You also want to ask if the interview is going to be virtual or in person. I mean, hopefully that's what they're telling you in the call, but you want to be clear. And if it's virtual, you want to know whether or not you're expected to appear on camera. Some hiring managers won't tell candidates they need to appear because they just assume you should know you should show up on camera. But ask. But some of them are completely comfortable doing a phone interview. When I interviewed for a rather large company, and this was before COVID and before Teams took over, but we definitely did a phone call, and it was no biggie. We didn't try to set up a video conference or anything. It was just a phone call. I've actually done several phone call interviews, so ask them what the expectation is regarding whether or not you should be on camera. Also, you want to give yourself time. So if they're asking you to interview tomorrow, the answer is no. It's no. Why are you interviewing the next day? Like, as we'll talk about later in this episode, you want to make sure you're prepared. You want to be comfortable, confident, and competent. So in order to be that, you want to make sure you have time to maybe clear up your day, even take the afternoon or the morning off, plan time to travel if you have to go in person. And it's really hard to do that all with 1 day notice unless you're not working and don't have anything else on your plate. So if a hiring manager asks you to interview the next day, say no. I've had candidates offer me to interview the next day and I declined because, I don't want them to do that. Sometimes the reason was, well, I'm going on a cruise or a trip or something the next week, and I won't be available. But I usually in those cases, especially if it's like a top candidate, like my top 3, I'm definitely willing to wait until they get back. So, don't take an interview the next day. I understand that people at times are hard and you may desperately need an opportunity, but give yourself time to feel confident so that you don't leave that interview feeling like there's anything unsaid. I remember once, it wasn't that they asked me to take the interview the next day, but the hiring manager missed several interviews and the recruiter had to reschedule them both times. So it was 2 times where the hiring manager missed the interview. The third time, I agreed to reschedule the interview. It was a short turnaround time. My day was awful. I barely slept the night before because there was a big project and lots of deadlines. And then my day was crazy. And then I went home at 4 o'clock with hardly any sleep, brain barely functioning, and bombed an interview. I should have said no. Because also, if they can't respect your time in the interview process, they're not going to respect your time once you get on board. And maybe that's a huge leap, but to me, it's a good indicator of what's to come. If you can't make time for me now, why would I expect for you to make time for me later? So, especially when you're trying to make a good impression and, pretend that we're all a family and you can't even make the call. So definitely pay attention to the things that are happening in the hiring process, because a lot of things that happen during your hiring process, if you look back, you're like, oh my God, should have figured that out because this thing happened in the interview, or this thing happened when I was, going through the onboarding process. Yeah. Companies tell on themselves all the time. If there's like a toxic culture or the work isn't being distributed well, it comes out. It comes out. Like if you start getting emails from your new team members, etc., at like 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and you don't want to work those kind of hours, flag. So pay attention and don't feel bad pulling out of the hiring process at any point. I mean, up until the day or weekend before. But if you realize it's not a fit, if you've seen any flags, trust your gut and, wait for the better opportunity, because the grass is not always greener. So once you've asked for time and you found out what kind of type of interview, who'll be on the panel, the number of rounds, and all this other stuff, you want to basically then start preparing for that interview. Oh, I have one more question, guys. And this one apparently is controversial. Time frame for selection. So I was speaking with a colleague the other day, and she was saying that she hates when people ask her that. How long will it take to get hired for a job? I think it's a great question, especially with the federal government, because our background check and pre-hiring process takes a significant amount of time. So if the hiring manager is slow rolling and they're like, oh, we're conducting interviews over the next month and then we'll probably make a selection in 2 months, it could be another 2 to 6 months after they make the selection for you to onboard. So if you got 8 months to sit in limbo waiting for this job, then hey, just do it. But if you don't really plan on doing that, especially if you have other irons in the fire that are smoking hot, that's where you want to put your time and energy. So I think that's a fair question to ask, and if you're a hiring manager that agrees with my colleague and you hate that question, tell me about it. Sound off in the comments wherever you're listening. So let's talk about this preparation part. So now you've scheduled the interview, you've gotten all the information you need, you've given yourself time, a day or an afternoon off to prepare. So let's start getting ready so you again could be the 3 C's of comfortable, confident, and competent in this interview. So you want to start preparing practice questions. And you can do this a number of ways. One, and the most easiest way, is you can go onto Google and say, or any search engine, and say practice questions for this kind of job, practice questions for designer developer, practice questions for ServiceNow administrator, practice interview questions for cashier, practice question for McDonald's cook. I promise you, nothing you can ask is missing out there on the internet when it comes to practice interview questions. So they're going to be someone that's already done the questions for you, whether it's in a Quora article, it might be on Reddit, it might be a legit blog, Indeed or LinkedIn, or some other career site. Someone's done the questions for you. So that's one way. Another way, if you want to be a little bit more specific and targeted in your particular planning, is to go back to the job description. So let's take a look at a job description, and you can also look this up and see if it comes up for you. So I went to Google and I typed in bank teller jobs. The first job that came up was a teller 1 from TD Bank. And as I'm looking through this job description, a couple of things stand out to me. One is the word customer, or phrase customer service, appears so many times in this job description. Almost every other line in the responsibilities is something about customers. And it's not only just customers, it's about providing legendary customer service, resolving problems independently, escalating difficult issues, processing transactions, again for customers, servicing customer accounts, answering customer inquiries. So it's definitely all about customers. And then in the qualification side, they ask about general math skills, ability to function in a fast-paced and changing environment, and detail-oriented. So what kind of questions do you think they're going to ask? I think it's pretty obvious that there'll be several questions about customer service, dealing with difficult customers, solving complex customer issues. Tell me about a time when. And then they may be questions where they ask you to apply your math skills, or there may even be a math assessment. So be prepared for that. If you know you don't do math regularly, and it's not that you don't know it, but you just want a nice little basic math refresher, look it up. Go find a quick little table or chart. This ability to function in a fast-paced and changing environment. They may ask you what kind of environments you like to work in, or they may tell you that. Excellent communication skills. So they may ask you something about your customer philosophy, or how do you keep your customers informed. There's a lot of questions here about following compliance and policies and procedures. So there may be questions about how you've applied or implemented new policies and procedures depending on the level of the role. So this job description is telling you what kind of questions you'll be asked. The third way that you can prepare your questions is from your own resume. Don't be the person who gets asked a question about something in their resume and you don't know the answer. I know many of us are using resume services and Chat GPT and other tools, but you should be able to speak to every single thing on your resume. I once had a candidate, and one of the primary reasons they didn't get the job was because I asked them a question. It was something they said they were an expert in on their resume, and then their response was, yeah, I don't actually know what that is. I was very surprised, because why would you put it on your resume as an expert if it was just sort of generally listed are wrapped up in a long list or string of skills, I would have been less concerned. But something you have on your resume as an expert you cannot articulately respond to is a problem. You can always say you're a beginner or a novice in something, but anything in your resume, you want to make sure you've looked it up, you understand what it is, and even if you haven't applied it, you can talk about how it relates to work you have applied. One big trick is when you are preparing questions or if you are looking at the job announcement and there is something that you have not done. And even when you're applying, you might want to put this skill on your resume because you looked it up, you know what it is. You want to say to the hiring manager, I do not know what this is, or I have I don't know what this is, I'm sorry. You want to say, I have not done this. However, from my understanding, it is this. And based on that understanding, I would apply it as such. So you want to show the manager that not only are you someone able to connect dots and do research, but you also know how to apply new concepts in practice. So definitely you want to really think about that as you prepare for your interview. So how many questions should you do? The average interview I've done for an hour and even 45 minutes has been about 10 questions. I've seen up to 20. And it usually depends on how the questions are structured. If there's a lot of fact-based yes or no questions, it tends to be more questions. But if there's definitely lots of behavioral questions, then there's less. And as a manager, it's really hard to time how long your interviews are going to take, to be honest. So I've done interviews where, excuse me, one candidate has taken 45 minutes and then another took 12. Like no exaggeration. Same set of questions. Now the 45-minute interview was the better one, but it's really hard to gauge how long people will take sometimes on interview questions. So, sometimes we have way too many questions for the time allotted. So when you think about how long you should take to prepare, after you come up with this list of questions and you start drafting the answers and practicing your delivery, it's really about 5 to 10 hours. Which is why I think it's so important that you ask some of the questions I listed up front. And also, if you think of any other things you should ask up front, please put it in the comments below. Because without asking those questions up front, you are spending 5 to 10 hours prepping for a job you may not actually want. Again, time is money. Don't let them take your money off the table if for a job you do not want. So 5 to 10 hours of this practice time. So after you've prepared the questions, I recommend creating a notebook. I don't recommend typing this. Actually, do what works best for you. The way my memory works, if I write something down, I'm more likely to remember all of the key points when I write it by hand. If I type it, I don't remember as much of it, so I don't know if it's like different parts of the brain. Someone, if you're really smart and you're like a neuroscientist or something, like let me know. But I don't remember it as well, so I usually will create a notebook. Now I'm really big into using Good Notes, and so I will create a notebook in Good Notes. I write down the question, I write down the answer. Write down the question, write down the answer. Or some example, it might even be bulleted out, and then I practice delivering that question. Now, the length of your delivery can also make or break your interview, so practicing how long it takes you to answer a question thoroughly is going to be critical. For your fact-based yes or no questions, you should be taking no longer than 30 seconds. So that's, for example, if someone said, Kalaida, are you familiar with public speaking? Yes, I have been publicly speaking since I was 7 years old, ever since I became a Sunday school teacher in my mom's church, and that has continued throughout my career, including national conferences and international training events. Not long at all. Now, if you have a question where it is, tell me how you prepare to deliver a public, how you prepare to speak at a public event. I'm still talking about the same thing, but now they want some more context. And so this is where I would apply one of the following acronyms. CCAR, which is Context, Challenge, Action, Result, or STAR, Situation, Task, Action, Result, are both methodologies to help you demonstrate your capability to tackle tough situations when you talk about the challenge, or just a situation in general, quantify your impact, and highlight your qualifications. So these are the describe a time when, or tell me about when, or how you did questions. So like the other one is tell me about how you prepare to publicly speak. So if I am going into a role where I feel like I need to present this as a challenge I overcame, such as a leadership role. Like, I was once challenged with having to prepare a speech for the Congress within 22 hours. And so here's how I approach this, whatever. If I decide to answer it more generically in the situation method, I would just say, the situation. So when I'm presented with a speech, first I consider who the audience is, and then I start talking to some general good practices, of the situation. When I get a speech, I want to consider the audience, and then I want to give an example of, for example, I was speaking for the White House press conference, blah, blah, blah. And at this particular event, I knew there would be senators and representatives from this and that and a bipartisan group. And, so you want to give some, again, like the situation or the context that you were dealing with. And was it a challenge or just a general situation, like where you assigned something to do? So either method works. The C-card method is definitely more important or useful if you're interviewing for leadership roles, especially in the especially in the government for executive service. But the STAR method works just as well. So you want to follow either one of these methods. I encourage you to look it up. I encourage you to write out your answers this way. So once you have the STAR method or the C card, whichever one you prefer to use to tell your story, you want to make sure that you can deliver it within the time that's been allotted. So what I actually do, and this is not me just telling y'all stuff that I wouldn't do, I set a timer on my phone for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 4 minutes, whatever time I think is reasonable for this question. I ask myself the question as an interviewer would, and then I answer the question. And I time myself. If I start feeling myself getting long-winded or going on to tangents, I start over. I update my notes in whatever method of notebook I have. I may cross out something and say, I don't need to talk about that, or that's irrelevant, or that didn't add, or it took too long to explain. You want to make sure that you're really practicing, that you're really comfortable with your answers, and that you're comfortable saying it without reading this notebook, which is why I said choose the method that allows you to remember more of what you wrote versus having to go back and read what you wrote. And so for me, typing, I'd have to go back and read. Because we're mostly doing virtual interviews these days, you can totally keep this notebook next to your desk or next to you and glance at it if certain questions are asked. We do expect you and encourage you to actually take time after you've been asked a question to make sure you understand it. And so during this time, you can also kind of glance at a note to get a refresher, because sometimes in interviews we're so nervous or the questions aren't quite what you expected, and so you forget some of the highlights or key points you want to make. So I wouldn't really consider this cheating. It's just helping you keep on track. Now, if you're in person, most in-person interviews, I usually just take my actual resume and have that in front of me as the memory jogger, because sometimes managers will ask you to go through your resume. So again, choose your method of preferred, C-CAR or STAR. Definitely, like I said, look it up. There's going to be so much more resources on it that I can share here. But in our future interview workshops that's coming in the future, we'll definitely work with you all individually to really break those down for your specific job opportunities and interview prep. So you have your common questions, you have your written answers, you've practiced your answers, you're good to go, right? Yes, for the most part, I would say you are. However, we haven't even talked about case study interviews. Case study interview prep is a lot different. And if you think your interview is going to include one because you haven't confirmed, but if you know it's going to include one, you definitely need to prep a little bit differently. For a case study interview, you want someone to help you. When I did my first set of case study interviews, I was actually super active on Twitter, and there was a woman, her name's Monique Ford, and I knew she was a consultant based on some things she shared. And I reached out to her and said, can you really help me? I'm interviewing for my first consultant role. I've never done a case study interview, and I don't really know what to expect. The great thing is there's so many websites, including one provided by that particular firm, that helped me prepare for the case study interviews. So I shared the case study examples with her. I didn't pre-look at the suggested answers or responses, and she asked me the case. I gave my answers, and then she gave me feedback based on the suggestions or maybe how she would have answered if she was asked. So the interesting about case study interviews is it's really not a right answer, but there's also definitely a wrong answer. But I would say definitely when you're thinking about case study responses, you want to think about the people, you want to think about the processes. Yeah, people, I would say people, processes, and definitely when you think about people, it's not just, your stakeholders, your shareholders, better yet, and it's not just the leaders. It's also the day to day rank and file staff. Their feelings about any major change is going to make or break that change. And if there's already cultural or environmental issues that are having them feel a certain kind of way, or they feel like their jobs are threatened or their growth is threatened, they're not going to receive things well. If the leader has had a bad transition period or is not doing well in the company, they will also probably not receive guidance or a new program from that leader well. And if they're unionized, they can make it really difficult for you. So you always want to think about the people and the processes and not just one or the other. You also want to consider the financial impact, if there's any global locality issues, like where they located themselves on the globe is a different impact because there's a different culture, a different language, all of those. If there's some previous like stock decreases. So really you want the answer, like I said, can be very broad, but you want to show that you're a person that can really think holistically about a problem and before you start trying to solve it or solution it. Because one thing that they don't want in a consultant is someone who's trying to solution before they fully understood the problem. So hopefully you all now have some great tips to help you prepare for jobs. So just a quick recap is you want to ask questions about the salary, the position, the benefits, what's flexible and negotiable within that job offer and those salary benefits. You want to look at things like vacation days, and things that matter to you, such as health coverage. You also want to make sure you understand the number of rounds of interviews, how long it will take to make a selection, and what type of interview experience you'll have, whether it's a panel or hiring manager, and if you're going to be doing this on the phone or in person, and if on Teams, are you expected to be on camera? So get clarification on that. And if you are expected to be on camera, please test Teams or Zoom or Cisco, whatever you're on, and figure it out before you actually jump into the interview. And then once you do all those things and you've said yes to the interview scheduled, you want to start prepping. So you want to make sure you come up with some practice questions, write down answers, practice delivering those questions, and include a partner or someone who can listen or help you practice, especially for case study interviews, because you want feedback. You also want someone who can point out any sort of like weird things you do, or awkward pauses, or just long-windedness, or when you go on wild tangents. Maybe you need to hear it from someone else. Some people just know when they don't interview well. Some of us don't. So definitely, get someone that's honest with you and that's in your corner to really support you through this. But I hope this really helps you all on your job searches and preparing for interviews coming up. Like I said, we have some more episodes coming up really, really soon that's going to dig deeper in this and give you all some real examples and stories about great interview questions and answers. So I'm just really looking forward to sharing with you all. And again, thank you so, so much for listening. And we're all in this together.